Hi everyone, welcome to the Boys Club. I'm Clarke Wolfe.
I'm Holly Payne.
And this is our show, You Should See. So Holly and I are going to discuss a title that we love, but for some reason might have gotten swept under the rug or flown under the radar. And this week we're really excited about what it is because this movie is coming out on Blu-ray.
Long overdue.
So long overdue. Do you want to tell them what it is?
Yeah, it is Ravenous.
Ravenous!
By Antonia Bird, and it is it's a movie about the myth of the Wendigo, the Native American cannibal creature. But anyway, you go ahead and you start us off.
Okay. Well, so Holly and I wanted to talk about this movie. It was, and I had seen this movie years ago because this is a movie that sort of pops up on horror lists every now and again, kind of as that thing that you haven't seen that maybe you should, which is great for our show.
Yeah, we're not the first to have called this one out as being one that was under the radar for a lot of people.
And I remember when the movie came out, I was young, but I remember the trailer. I remember seeing this trailer, and I think that this was a case of a studio not really knowing what to do.
I could not agree more. In fact, I watched the trailer again before rewatching the film, which I've seen at least 20 times. I love this movie. But I watched the trailer, and I was like, fail.
Yeah,
fail.
It doesn't
terrible trailer.
Terrible trailer. It doesn't explain the movie at all. A lot of times, you know, especially then and in hindsight, I remember it being pitched as like a quasi-vampire movie, which I think
there's a few elements of that, but that's not what it is at all.
It's not what it is at all, and I think it's just because it's easier to say kind of vampire as opposed to Native American legend of cannibalism and creatures and whatever.
Right.
So yeah, but so I rewatched it recently as an adult, and gosh, it's so good.
It's fantastic, and it's one of those movies that, well, first of all, let's start off by telling you a little bit about what it is.
Sure.
It's about a camp that's basically, it's during the Mexican-American War, and there's a camp of soldiers. Guy Pearce, an actor that just died about 10 years ago. I think his name was gosh, now I'm forgetting his name. He plays the captain, and I can't remember his name. I'll get back to it later. But you've got Jeffrey Jones, you've got Jeremy Davies, you've got Robert Carlyle. It's an incredible ensemble cast, but the setting for it is very unusual to have it be a horror film set in the, Mexican-American War, 1800s. In a remote area in the woods in California. Even though it was shot, I read up, it was shot in like near Romania or something.
Yeah, it looked very European to me. But
did it? Okay.
It did.
It looked like Yosemite to me. So I was like, but it's not Yosemite because I've been there. But in any case, it's an incredible story that is it's really a black comedy.
Yes. And just on that note, I think that so especially with horror, or something that could be considered horror, we often find that studios have a very hard time selling things that are tonally not one thing or the other.
You can't put it in a box.
You can't put this in a box, and so, what are you going to sell if you're the studio? Well, you're going to sell the cannibal aspect, you're going to sell some sort of blood and guts, but there's so much more to this movie than that.
Yeah, and it starts off with basically Guy Pearce. There's a lot of time jumping in this film. Guy Pearce is, I think in the very beginning, he's eating a steak, right? In one of the very first scenes, and he's just horrified by looking at this bloody mess on his plate. And there's some flashback scenes to him being in a pile of bodies and his captain, I guess, having been killed. It's a war, and he's got the blood dripping down his throat, and it starts off with some great gore. But what happens is basically this camp, Guy Pearce is in it, Jeffrey Jones, Jeremy Davies, David Arquette, playing a real idiot boy, which he's perfectly cast for.
Yeah.
But in any case, a stranger comes to the camp, and they're trying to figure out what this guy's story is, and he's played by Robert Carlyle, and he tells them an incredible story about having to basically... Well, he tells a story, and then we find out the truth later, but basically what he comes to the camp with is telling a horror story about how his entire encampment had to eat each other in order to survive, and he was one of the only people
who made it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, who was able to live.
Right.
Robert Carlyle, because we don't want to give anything away, because we're recommending this to you, so if you haven't seen it, you should see it, but Robert Carlyle is so good.
He's just an incredible actor.
He is so freaking good, and there's a lot more to his character than meets the eye, especially at first. And to be honest with you, when I was rewatching the movie, I had very, very, very little memory of it. Yeah, and so it was really like seeing it for the first time.
Nice.
And
I love those.
Yeah, and I did not see any of it coming, and that's just the best way. That's the best way to do it. It's so good. Carlyle's so good, and also
matched with Guy Pearce.
That's what I was about to say. Guy Pearce, and we talked about this briefly on the Bloodcast, the podcast I do a couple of weeks ago. But Guy Pearce, for an actor who is so traditionally handsome and who has that matinee look and who is British and charming and suave,
right?
He's
Australian, actually.
Oh, okay.
But,
yeah. But the movies that he chooses to do are so out of the box, and the roles that he picks are so not your typical.
I love that about him.
I love that about him too.
He takes risks unlike a lot of other actors, and I would say the same thing for Robert Carlyle.
Oh, definitely.
As well. And they have an intensity that is matched perfectly. Like they are, it's almost in many ways I would say that their relationship in this film is almost a love story. It's
very playful. That was something that I kind of took away from it. Like there's an element of,
and yet they're bitter enemies.
Oh yes.
But there's other stuff going on.
There's an element of fun to their relationship that I think in the hands of maybe another director or in the hands of different actors might have been glossed over or not played up. So.
And I was actually when I first saw this film, I didn't know that it was Antonia Bird. I didn't know it was a female director, and the cast is primarily men. There's maybe I think there's actually just one or two women in it.
Right. Yes.
But boy, does she work with this cast beautifully, and the cast is it's a small ensemble. There's another actor named Neil McDonough who is fantastic in it too, even though he's not in it for very long, but he's really good because he's a stark visual aesthetic contrast to some of the other people in the cast. And well, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there's so many scenes where the stakes are really high and you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
But there's an element of humor to this that I think is another reason why they just couldn't put this in any specific category. There are moments in it that yes, there are feelings like it's going to be like it's a vampire film. They're using sort of the cannibal aspect of it is used, especially with costuming and stuff like that, for Robert Carlyle and some other people in it. You can see the elements that they're using to sort of pay homage to, say, Bram Stoker's Dracula or something. But that's not the overt. Element, and it's not like any other horror film I've ever seen, nor any other horror comedy that I've ever seen.
That's a huge thing, is the tone. I think this movie has a lot of the tonal shift. It shifts a lot, but it doesn't feel abrupt.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel weird. It works, but it's not traditional.
No.
And with the music.
Thank you for bringing that up.
The music.
Yeah, the music is actually, it's, okay, so I've seen the movie, like I said, 20 plus times. The soundtrack I've listened to since it came out. It's Michael Nyman and Damon Albarn. Damon Albarn is half of the band Blur, the British band Blur, which is the 90s Britpop band. And Damon Albarn's stuff with soundtracks and going off on his own projects are good. His union with Michael Nyman in this movie changes the film so much that if... John, my boyfriend, and I were watching it, and we realized if you took that soundtrack away from the film, it wouldn't work as well.
Yeah.
The direction is still fantastic, but with that music, the soundtrack becomes a character of its own in the film, and it's got that sort of Civil War, sort of 1800s vibe to it, but it's modern and contemporary, and it sets the stakes as the stakes are raising. The music implies that as well, and it's just a beautiful companion to an incredibly unique film. It's a unique soundtrack to a very unique story and film.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really know how else to talk about it or what else to say about the movie without
giving too
much away. But it is super unique, and like we said, it is coming out on Blu-ray. But it's also on instant Netflix.
It is.
So
it just popped up again.
It did. So you can watch it there, and you definitely should. We're running out of battery. But yeah, I mean, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Let's see. Anything else? You know what? I would just say going in, just know that you're in for comedy as well as horror. It's not one thing or the other, and just be, be amazed by it.
And be ready. But it might also be one that is worth watching twice. Because once you kind of know what you're in for, you can revisit and appreciate a little bit and pay attention to the nuances.
You will definitely pick up more.
Yes,
the more you
watch. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think that's good.
You should see it.
So you should see. Go watch Ravenous and check it out. There's also a lot of really cool special features on the Blu-ray. Lots of cool interviews, commentaries, things like that. So if you are in the market for that kind of thing, it's from Shout Factory. So check it out. Awesome. Yay. Well, thanks so much for watching. I'm Clarke Wolfe.
I'm Holly Payne.
And we'll see you next time.